When Hitchcock decided to shoot Psycho in black and white, he cited two reasons. First, it would be inexpensive, and by using the television crew from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he was able to budget the film at under $1 million. Second, he was concerned that the garish red of blood might disturb audiences unaccustomed to such gory visuals. But the use of black and white had another benefit in that it allowed him to riddle his movie with visual markers that would assist viewers in digesting the events of the film. He would employ darkness and light, shadows and reflections to represent confusion, duplicity, guilt, corruption, and death. The average viewer might not notice or appreciate these indicators, but their effect subconsciously enhances the effects of the story and help to make Psycho a benchmark in both horror and filmmaking history. And that's what I want to discuss in this video, how Hitchcock took advantage of black and white, light and darkness to help tell the story of Psycho. As the movie opens, the camera point of view peeps into the window of a hotel to find our protagonist, Marion Crane, with her lover Sam. Notice that she's dressed in white underwear, signifying innocence, this despite being embroiled in a sexual tryst. As she goes to a mirror to dress, she casts no noticeable shadows, remains well lit, and we do not see her reflection. All of this has the combined effect of projecting a unified, unsullied look, as she is untroubled by darkness and is both outwardly and inwardly at peace. Throughout the film, a shadow cast often signifies an internal division or moral uncertainty. The first time we see Marion cast a strong shadow is when she departs from work early on the pretext of having a headache. She's thinking about stealing the $40,000 in cash which she's meant to deposit at the bank. She says, "I guess I'll take this money to the bank, then go home and sleep it off." I guess. We then see her shadow precede her into the next shot. As she moves into frame, the shadow is resolved and we find she has changed from her formerly innocent white underwear into black underwear, signifying guilt. Her decision has been made. The indecisiveness manifest in her shadow gives way to the black garb of her corruption, now firmly in place. The shot moves to the envelope full of cash. She has not taken it to the bank. She will not be doing so. It's laid on the bed, the envelope slightly torn to expose its lurid contents. There's a sexual element, reminiscent of her recent meeting with Sam at the seedy hotel. In the remainder of the scene, Marion is resolute, determined to steal the money, which she avoids looking at. The only time she shows uncertainty, her eyes involuntarily returning to the envelope, she is shown divided, first by a mirror, which creates a reflection, and again when the specter of her final doubts takes the form of a shadow cast behind her. When she stuffs the white envelope into her black purse, Marion's corruption is internalized. When Marion flees town, we immediately see that she is in a black car. This again signifies her guilt for the theft and flight from her boss. These feelings are plain in her expressions when she spots her boss witnessing her escape. After an encounter with the police leaves her shaken, Marion decides to shed the trappings of her guilt by exchanging her black vehicle with its Arizona plates for one that will allow for greater anonymity, one with California plates and colored cream to project innocence. Notice how California Charlie, declaring he is in no mood for trouble, is cast in sunlight, while Marion is enveloped in shadow. An amateur criminal, her efforts to disguise her guilt are paltry and will ultimately prove unsuccessful. She botches the job by pressuring the salesman and paying cash, and to make matters worse, she's observed making the switch by the same cop that pulled her over on the road. Finding herself observed by police, Marion begins to cast shadows again, and is split by a mirror in the ladies' room when she counts out the cash to purchase the car, meant to disguise her identity and her guilt. She's again uncertain, plagued by doubts about her course of action. By the time she pulls away, her new vehicle is already cast in shadow, and appears more gray than white. Her guilt already corrupting the edifice of innocence she's tried to adopt. What follows is a sequence during which night descends again, and as Marion muses and frets over her crime and missteps, she is enveloped in darkness that once again becomes almost total, until the only thing clearly visible is the Bates Motel sign announcing a vacancy. Which brings us, as it does Marion, to Norman. When we first see Norman Bates emerging from the darkness, he's carrying but not using an umbrella. This is a subtle indicator of his mental imbalance, and easily overlooked by the unsuspecting audience. Norman actually seems normal enough, even appearing less divided than Marion if we follow the visual cues we've been examining. Where Marion is split into mirror images, Norman is sometimes without reflection, without shadow. As they become acquainted, Norman's inner turmoil begins to slip through, and we see his shadows betraying him in this sequence, in which he introduces Marion to her room. When Norman formally introduces himself, Marion is still divided by her reflection, which speaks of her duplicity. But although his shadow lurks behind him on the door, Norman is more sincerely himself at this point than he ever will be again. When next we see him, and he brings Marion dinner, he is haunted by both his shadow and reflection, adding significance to his statement that Mother isn't quite herself today. It is now Norman who is strictly divided, and is often halved during the rest of the film, either by casting a shadow, a reflection, or by being immersed half in shadow, his remaining half bathed in light. Where Marion suffered occasional bouts of doubt and guilt, Norman is truly of two minds. There are times when Mother's presence is represented in other ways, but these motifs are ubiquitous throughout the remainder of the film. After Marion's dinner and the parlor scene in which Norman and she discuss personal traps, Norman spies on Marion as she undresses. She's again shown in her black underwear, which now serves the double purpose of symbolizing both her guilt and his. It's his voyeuristic desire that triggers the emergence of Mother and the violence to come. The shower scene represents Marion's final attempt to cleanse herself of guilt, washing away her sin, as it were. And we feel that this is going to work. She intends at this point to turn herself in and is feeling good at the prospect of redemption. She once again appears as anyone else with a diminishing presence of shadow to indicate remaining guilt. But her guilt was not washed away. It's been merely externalized, as the specter of Mother appears in blackness to exact punishment for her sins. After the murder, when Norman uses the car to dispose of Marion's body, the vehicle is shown restored to its light coloring, again indicating Marion's too-late redemption. She's no longer sullied, but she's dead. Now operated by Norman, it also provides a visual indication of how much more practiced he is at projecting an appearance of innocence than Marion had been. In this scene, where Norman is cleaning in the wake of Marion's murder, notice the interplay between Norman, his shadow, and his reflection. He seems perpetually connected with one of the two, until he immerses himself in cover of darkness. And when he finishes the cleanup, covering for his mother's sins, the car is back to appearing dark again. At the site where he will dispose of Marion's body, we find Norman nervously divided into halves by light and darkness, the influence of Mother. The next time we see him dispose of a car, this time belonging to Arbogast, he will be far less conflicted and uncertain. He's now almost entirely enveloped in darkness. So Marion is divided by doubt and conscience, and Norman is split by Mother and plagued by duplicity and death. But what about everybody else? Just who is the psycho referred to in the title? Is it Norman? Mother? Marion? Or is it less simple than that? Hitchcock often claimed to find the movie very funny, a tongue-in-cheek joke of sorts, and when Norman famously asserts, "We all go a little mad sometimes," he implies that even the audience is not exempt from the dangers of corruption. As the movie enters its final act, Hitchcock begins to employ the motifs already established to have some fun with the secondary characters. We'll see them frequently divided or obscured, often in more confused and fractured ways than Norman himself. Just as the casting of an external shadow can indicate an internal division, there are moments when characters become immersed in shadow, their image completely obscured. This seems to indicate a lack of awareness as they move into uncertain situations, oblivious of the dangers ahead. We see this when Norman invites Arbogast to have a look around the motel. The private detective has no idea what he's getting into. Shortly after, we see Marion's sister Lila enter a similarly unenlightened state, as she has not heard from Arbogast and is unable to leave well enough alone. It's now Lila and Sam whose point of view the audience adopts, and it is they who find themselves almost permanently attached to shadows, reflections, and darkness. They're both literally and metaphorically in the dark about what happened to Marion and Arbogast, but they have suspicions, and their uncertainty divides them. Discussing their options in Sam's multi-paned back room, they create multiple reflections, their confusion leaving them less mentally organized even than Norman. He's divided in two. They are fractured into several parts. When Lila asks Sam why she shouldn't come with him to the Bates place, his initial reply is an amusingly simple, "I don't know." As they search the motel grounds, their trepidation and uncertainty peaks, and we see their shadows and reflections multiply. But where Marian's visual splits indicated moral uncertainty and self-doubt, theirs is a purer kind, one of intellectual confusion rather than moral. In Mother's room, Lila is startled when confronted with the representation of her own confusion, her reflection doubly split by mirrors in opposition. And when she finally discovers Mother and learns the truth, in that moment of illumination when her doubts should be neatly resolved, Lila knocks the swinging bulb so that light and shadow dance across her face, her thoughts now disarrayed by terror. All of which invites us to consider, do we all go a little mad sometimes? And who, after all, is the psycho? So, this has been my first attempt at a video for YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to click. Feel free to leave any comments. If you didn't enjoy it and you think I should die, well, shoot me.